Hey, good morning, COD students. Welcome to week 6 of our walk, jog, run course. I got my computer in front of me here. I'm going to be going through your 2 assignments. So this first assignment is you're going to be reading another article. It's Why Faster is Not Always Better on Workouts from Trail Runner Magazine. And I wanted you to read this article. I want you to read this article because it's a bit of a contrast to the last article that we read, the Run Like an Egyptian article. In that, Run Like an Egyptian, they kind of put an emphasis on the high intensity workout and the benefits of that, which is certainly valid. And this article takes a little more cautious approach to intensity of running. And you're going to find that throughout running. Of course, we all probably find that throughout life, right? There's different opinions on things. So in running, you're going to get different opinions on training principles, on nutrition, on footwear, on running form, right? So 2 of those examples will be running form, right? If I go out and run in front of 10 different experts in running, right? So they might be physical therapists, they might be coaches, they might be former Olympians. All 10 of those people are probably going to give me different tweaks to do to my form to be more efficient, right? And similarly with footwear, right? You have highly accomplished runners that run in minimalistic footwear, right? So it's very close to barefoot. There's very little cushion, and they get great results off that. And then you also have, again, highly accomplished runners that run in very, very cushioned shoes, right? This new trend of footwear like the Hokas, Hoka, if you ever want to look them up, very, very cushioned. And again, there's people that get great results by wearing those shoes. So, right, different things work for different folks. So that's one of the reasons when you do your activity logs, I often ask you to put in there, how did it feel, right? Because with our running and our walking, you always get objective data, right? You're going to get to the time you were out there, your distance, your pace, you can get your heart rate and all this stuff. But it's important to pay attention to the subjective, right? How did this feel, right? Because you may look in a magazine and read an article, down the road about some training principle. And I don't want you just to take it as gospel, obviously, right? You got to take it, try it, and then be able to perceive, hey, how did that feel to me, right? If it didn't work, you cast it aside. If it worked, well, then maybe it's something you work into your exercise routine. All right, so let's look at this article kind of in particular. It's a little bit complicated as far as the principles they talk about with human physiology, but where I wrote up here what you're going to be looking at, I gave a couple principles. So the first 2 principles are going to talk about looking at training for running on a spectrum, right? So when we are out running or out walking or out exercising, you're using some aspect, some of your energy sources coming from your aerobic system, right? And some of it coming from your RL. And there is a portion that's coming from your anaerobic, right? You can be aerobic or anaerobic in your exercise, and really it's not one or the other. That's where they're talking about a spectrum, right? You're somewhere either way down if I'm way down that aerobic end of this intensity spectrum, right? It's very easy, right? Maybe I'm walking, or if it's not an exercise, if it's just physical activity, maybe I'm folding clothes, right? Something you could do for days on end, right? Whereas something further down the anaerobic end of the spectrum is like your high intensity sprint, right? Your 100-meter sprint, or maybe you're doing a max lift, like a squat, right? The most amount of weight you can lift for one squat, right? So that's more anaerobic. And so any activity you're doing lies somewhere on that spectrum where you're some aspect, maybe you can give it a percent. Maybe I'm 70% anaerobic, but I'm 30% aerobic, okay? Or maybe I'm 50-50 if I'm a little more intense. What the article cites is a couple studies that show that we can improve our anaerobic system at a slower improvement rate, but for a longer duration, right? So they give an example of a study, and I don't have it in front of me here, but they took, I think they say women, and they did some high intensity workout with group A, and they did some low intensity work with group B. And they said after, I think the number is 6 weeks, maybe 12 weeks, they were both at the same level, but the group that did the high intensity work had made their gains within like the first 3 weeks, right? So they made this rapid gain and then plateaued, whereas the group that was doing the more anaerobic work were kind of on this steady gain. And so they say that, you know what, you can get more sustained improvement through anaerobic work, so low intensity. Our article says that, you know, you're working out at about 80% of your maximum ability. All right. And then they're going to give you 5 bullet points. So it says most workouts should feel like a kid at recess. And I love that quote because that's kind of how I approach running. That's why another thing I talked to you guys about, I've given you an article about, was finding fun and enjoyment in running, right? It should be enjoyable. It should feel like a recess. So some of the bullet points are: you should not have to slow down substantially during your walk or run, right? So if you go out for a 3-mile run, the first 2 miles, you know, shouldn't be maybe at a 10-minute pace, and then all of a sudden the third mile you have to drop to a 15-minute mile pace, right? You should be able to kind of maintain a relatively steady state for your run. If you crash like that, like you do your first 2 miles and then you have that last mile where you just fall apart, this article would say that you're going too hard. You're going too hard those first 2 miles. You should rarely go faster than your mile pace, right? So your mile pace, if you think about, when we were all in PE and you're running that 4 laps around the track, mile pace. If you can run, your mile, right, in let's say again, the 10-minute mile pace. Okay, if you can run a 10-minute mile pace, and that's what you can do for an all-out 1 mile. You should never run faster in an interval than that. So that means even if you're running a 1/4 mile interval, right? So once around the track, stay at that 10-minute mile pace. Don't increase the pace of your interval just because it's a shorter distance. The one alternative, or not alternative, but where they say that doesn't apply is if you're doing strides. And strides are just very short, maybe 30 yards, where you're just going down the field just at a real quick pace, but very, very short. So that's the one exception there. It says, when in doubt, slow down during intervals, right? And that'll help you with the first 2 principles. Do heavily focused speed train only every 2 to 6 weeks. And that's a wide range, right? From 2 to 6 weeks, right? So I do some high intensity work, and then I'm either going to wait 2 weeks, or I'm going to wait 6 weeks before I do anything really heavily intense again. And again, that's where I talk about listening to your body, right? You should be able to feel when you're recovered, right? I personally feel like if I, in my mind, feel like I should do a speed workout or something like that, but I just don't feel like doing it, that means my body's probably not ready, right? So your body should feel ready. And then a big one here is try not to compare yourselves to others, right? Everybody's different. Even if you're out on doing a workout with somebody, you shouldn't really necessarily compare yourself to them, because you're different and you've had a different day than they've had, right? So maybe they slept great and you didn't, or you ate a great meal before and they had a bunch of garbage, right? So you can't compare yourself. And I know it's tough. It's one of the reasons why I kind of have a love-hate relationship with Strava, the app that I have you guys use. I like it because just as a runner, it's nice to have that input, but it is something that you can attend to, right? It's that objective data, and if I attend too much to the objective data, then I'm not attending to how I feel as a runner. And then also, it's just a natural tendency to compare yourself to others. You might look at somebody else and be like, well, how come they were running at an 8-minute mile pace? I wish I could get to that 8-minute mile pace. So just try not to do that, right? We're all different, and compare yourself mainly to yourself. All right, so and then so for this question, you're going to read the article, and then answer the one question here. It says, what are your thoughts on this article's cautious approach to high intensity workouts and the 5 bullet points above, right? So just tell me, do you agree with it? Do you disagree with it? Something you're willing to try? What have you? Just give me your thoughts. Let me know you read the article, basically. And again, I'm going to close this module on midnight, Sunday, November 8th. You're all doing great so far. Keep up the strong work and keep encouraging each other. It's great to see.